Hello and welcome to our review of Veronica Mars. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we are discussing the episode Meet John Smith. This episode originally aired October 12th, 2004. So, Dave, why don't we look at what was number one in the box office in October of 2004? I'll give you a hint. It's an animated film.
Yeah, with that around the time. Hmm. Damn, there's nothing that's immediately coming to mind for that one, especially there, because I think at some particular point in this year or the next year around that time that there were a couple really big heavy hitters.
I believe this did quite well, but I've never seen it, so.
Mm.
It is Shark Tale.
Oh, 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 God. Ugh.
Yeah, the movie that was everywhere that nobody wants to admit they ever saw. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, that was the thing.
Alrighty, Dave. Number one song in America this week.
Hmm. Again, I think from the last episode, it's only been a little while, so I wouldn't be surprised if the one was still up there from Shakira, I believe it was from last time.
It is, yeah, it's goodies, yeah.
Mm.
And finally, moving on to the video games, we have a couple of releases. Some notable stuff here. So, around this time, on October 1st, if you were a Windows or Mac player, you could pick up
Mm.
a game called Cult Heretic Kingdoms, which I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, not ringing the bell in my case.
Also on October 1st, if you had a GameCube, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up Scalar, which sure looked like it was a game. On
Yeah.
October 4th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up Mortal Kombat Deception, which, yeah, it was a Mortal Kombat game.
Like
Uh,
Mortal Kombat as best as you could describe Mortal Kombat game at the time?
it was a decent PS2 Mortal Kombat game.
Meh.
Also on October 4th, it kind of got blown out of the water by this next release because if you had a PC, GameCube, PS2, Xbox, or a Game Boy Advance, you were probably going to be picking up Tony Hawk's Underground 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
October 5th, if you had a PC, you could pick up Tribe's Vengeance, which is some kind of first person shooter. Also on October 5th, if you had a PC, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up Conflict Vietnam, which is another shooter.
Meh.
October 5th as well, if you had a Game Boy Advance, you could pick up Mega Man Zero 3.
Yes. Very much so.
Also on October 5th, if you had a PC, you could pick up Nancy Drew, A Curse of Blackamore Manor.
Yes, because that was a series that existed.
Yes, and I think they're still going.
Yeah, that's not a good point.
October 5th, if you had an Xbox, you could pick up Siberia 2, which I'm not familiar with.
No.
Also on October 5th, if you had a PS2, you could pick up Toka Race Driver 2, which is obviously some kind of racing game. And the big release for October 5th, and I use that term generously, if you had a PC, PS2, or Xbox, in theory, you could go pick up Leisure Suit Larry Magna Cum Laude.
Yeah. Yeah.
And finally, because Nintendo went, fuck everybody else, we're going to win, on October 11th, if you had a GameCube, you could go to the store and pick up this little game called Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door.
The game that was re-released recently with the things that is doing gangbusters.
Yes, and it is very, very good.
Yes.
Although I have to play more of it because I still haven't done much. Anyway.
You do, because you haven't even gotten to the thing that you're going to rant and rave about.
Okay. So let's get into this episode.
Right.
Okay. After a group of boys point out Veronica and call her a 10, or a 9, sorry, fair, Troy comes up to her and invites her on a trip on his father's boat. After a running schoolmate knocks Veronica's books out of her hands, Duncan Kane helps her pick them up. After school, Keith Mars questions Veronica about why her guidance counselor called that day. Veronica dodges his question and tells him her realization that her mother was having an affair with Jake Kane. Meanwhile, Duncan is getting annoyed with his parents, especially Jake, who is pressuring him academically. The next morning, Veronica wakes up from a dream in which she is making out with Duncan. Oh no, what could be happening? Veronica and Keith go to a video store, and Veronica sees one of the boys who was talking about her earlier, Justin Smith. Meanwhile, it is revealed that Duncan has been taking antidepressants for roughly 6 months. Veronica accepts Troy's proposal to go out while Duncan talks with Logan about his disappointment towards his new girlfriend, Shelley. Veronica drags Justin into the women's bathroom where he tells her that he wants her help in finding his long-lost father. Justin is unable to produce any valuable information about him besides that his name is John Smith. Meanwhile, the guidance counselor, Rebecca James, meets with Keith and tells him that Veronica talks back to teachers, is late, and is socially isolated. And I went, oh shit, so was I. Keith retorts by saying that nothing is wrong with his daughter. At dinner that night, Jake laughs about how Duncan is planning to get a life coach. Duncan angrily pushes back at his parents. The next day, Keith meets Wallace and Veronica tells Keith about her investigations. Veronica asks Wallace to steal guidance counselor records for him. Meanwhile, Duncan has stopped taking his medication. In addition, Justin hands Veronica a mixtape hinting at romantic intentions. Oh, this poor boy.
Yeah.
Veronica and Troy are having a good time on their date. However, Troy becomes a little too aggressive and Veronica pulls away from his attempts to kiss her. She looks after him in despair as she wonders what's wrong with her. The camera cuts to Duncan and his new girlfriend making out in a car. However, he accidentally calls her Veronica. Wallace retrieves Justin's guidance counselor file, which contains records that his father died when he was in first grade. However, Justin soon receives a note from his father, leaving a contradiction. Later, Justin visits Veronica and requests her help once again. She accepts. She reopens the investigation and makes progress. The next day, Veronica talks to Troy again. When Duncan makes a quip to Duncan about Veronica, Duncan gets aggressive. He sees Troy and Veronica talking and eventually kissing, and flips over the side of the bleachers in anger and jealousy. Veronica takes Duncan to the hospital. Jake questions Duncan about how this accident happened, but Duncan asks his father to leave so he can talk to the doctor by himself. Their whole conversation is not shown, but Duncan tells him about his refusal to take the antidepressants. Keith visits the guidance counselor and asks her to talk to Veronica. Veronica shares her pictures of the 3 John Smiths who live in San Diego to Justin. Justin possibly recognizes the third picture, and Veronica reports that he is a petty criminal. After school, Veronica and Justin follow his father. Justin dashes out to meet John Smith 3 and realizes it is not his father, even though the two share the same handwriting. Meanwhile, Duncan suffers from hallucinations of Lily as a result of his withdrawal from the medication, which seems suspect to me, but I'm not a doctor. Veronica and Justin follow John Smith to his house. Veronica pokes her nose into the house and sneaks into the garage. Although the man denies having a son, a woman, played by Melissa Leo, soon pulls into the driveway. In fact, it is Justin's father, who is revealed to be a trans woman, now called Julia. They talk in the driveway, and Justin leaves feeling hurt and confused after saying a few hurtful things to Julia. In the car on the way home, Veronica comforts Justin, pointing out that Julia drives 90 miles each way just to see Justin while he works at the video store. Veronica soon enough decides to go find her mother in Arizona. Meanwhile, Duncan starts taking his antidepressants again. The next day, when Duncan encounters Veronica, he returns to his old withdrawn self. Keith goes on a coffee date with Rebecca, the guidance counselor. Justin reconnects with his parents through his video store job. Veronica visits the apartment where her mother stayed, but runs into an old college friend of hers who does not provide any useful information. In addition, Veronica visits Troy, who embraces her. And that is the movie or the episode.
Yeah.
So
All
what did
that
you,
high
what
school
did you
drama.
think of this?
On the one hand, it was interesting with the couple little bits and sort of ideas that they sort of went to into with this. I suppose the first one was with the client within the show. Shoot, I got his name mixed up with his father's. The
Justin.
Smith, Justin Smith. Yes. Just the case of young kid supposedly trying to get a date with a hot girl, gets into the case of getting to help out with the case of trying to find her father and all the particular cases. It's like, oh my god, like understandable in the what case, but just with the older self might be like, oh my god, that's so stupid. Um, but nevertheless works. Um, I think interesting enough spin with going with the case of father is alive, but having the case of being trans in those sort of cases from there, and then the thought of, oh wait, this was around that sort of time. How much of a topic would this supposedly have been?
Yeah, so I thought, like, okay, considering the show was from 2004, when they revealed that, I was like, oh no, oh god, no, this is gonna be bad. But I was surprised at how well it was handled.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't like they didn't make a joke of it. They actually treated it like seriously and like didn't just, try to make a gag of it or something. Like, it was handled really well.
Yes, and it's one of the particular things, especially with more of the uh, live action or more other sorts of shows in those sorts of cases, that it has to be either that serious spin, because even with heading into things nowadays, you can't get away with too much of a tease on that sort of stuff now. But I'm very happy to see that even nowadays they treated it with a decent amount of respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Like yeah, they handled it surprisingly well for 2004.
Hmm.
Yes. So, there's a couple of things in this that I thought were kind of interesting. Julia says that she enjoyed the noir film Consenting Adults, which I'm like, that's a weird film for a high school student to recommend to someone.
Possibly. It might have also been a case of they have a specific list of movies to recommend and a little blurb of what the basis of the movie is that they probably have. But
But
even then, it was kind of the case of that probably doesn't exist, but they'll have it in the show to counteract certain things. But yeah.
no, it's a real movie. It's just a weird choice for a high school student to recommend. And then he recommends Body Heat, and I was like, that's another. First off, writer, I think we're getting a look into your mind here. Because ain't no high school student in 2004 knowing about Body Heat.
Yeah, yeah, that probably might have been a case.
Also, I do love that Keith is a fan of the movie Slapshot, which just, for some reason, that just makes sense to me. I'm just like, yeah, you would like that movie. That just makes perfect sense. Yeah, so I thought this was quite a fun episode. It's not super, like, arc heavy. It's more or less just like a kind of mystery of the week, but I thought it was fun.
Mm. I think the other particular thing was going through Duncan arc as well, of his particular thoughts of what's going on with him, the particular things that he's going through, the thought of taking antidepressants and whatnot, and not understanding too many of the effects of having depression and going into those sorts of things to that extent. I think they treated it well enough of having cases of he has a hallucination or is acting in different sorts of ways, because he's got a lot of stuff to still sort of work through, and it's not coming out in super healthy ways.
No, I like, okay. So I like that they're, like, again, doing this whole thing. Like, they're dealing with this mental health issue for this character, and, like, that's cool.
Mm.
I don't know about if you stop taking antidepressants, if that gives you hallucinations. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm willing to go with it because you need to kind of do the hallucination thing. Because he does have a hallucination of Lily, and she says basically that, like, hey, you know that the official story about what happened to me doesn't make sense. When are you gonna, like, act on that? Which is kind of like the major plot thing that happens in this episode.
Yeah, I know. With how the series goes along. I think the only one other thing that either tickled me or other particular things was Duncan hanging out with his buddies on the bleachers and whatnot, starts going out into Grease songs and whatnot from there. And it's like, obvious sort of choice, but still sort of works.
Yeah, I feel like that's another one of those, like, I think we're getting a glimpse into the writer's mind here, because how many high school students in 2004 would have done that? But it's still a fun scene, and I'm like, whatever, I don't really care that much. It's just kind of an interesting little choice. So yeah, if there's nothing else about this episode, Dave, we will next week be discussing a little episode called The Wrath of Khan. No? Okay.
I had the thought about it, but it's like, is my voice really prepared for that? Don't know if I want to strain anything just yet.
So in this episode, Veronica is going to help Wallace and his new girlfriend, Georgia, when she is cheated out of $6,000 in a confidence scam by the Silicone Mafia. Meanwhile, Logan makes a video memorial of Lily for a memorial ceremony at the school to dedicate a fountain in her name. Yes. So, until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.